So one of the part of the Marcos's pact with the United States when he left office and to accept asylum was he was not to engage in any political activities in the Philippines. And this meant while he was living in the United States, he couldn't contact any politicians. And he had an understanding that he will not engage any activities in the Philippines because that would be considered unacceptable. President Reagan was quoted, invited Marcos to come here to live and not to do anything else. He is no longer the president of the Philippines. So, in order to save their political careers, several Marcos supporters, these would be governors, mayors, offered to help Aquino in any means possible to legitimize her presidency of the Philippines. And they did not want to lose their positions because there was so much corruption and they were making money. And so these even were senators and other politicians, congressmen, and other high-ranking government officials who some of them actually barricaded themselves in the government offices just so they wouldn't be thrown out and fired. But one Ponson really came in and announced that they would be able to stay until at least June 30th. And so one of the first acts Corazon Aquino did was create the PCGG, the Philippine Commission on Good Government, and they discovered that Marcos did in fact steal funds from the United States, foreign aid, military funding, and he had kickbacks from federal contracts and various other sources. So basically, the United States was giving the Philippines $400 million a year, plus they were giving them billions of dollars a year. So right after Marcos left, the Swiss government froze all of his assets, and they found out that he had something like $200 to $300 million in one bank account in the Philippines. And Attorney DeGuzman, he was the power of attorney over Marcos's money, actually tried to help the Philippine government retrieve the money. And because some loyalists to Marcos got on wind and took away the power of attorney. And I will talk about that in another episodes. And so he tried to withdraw and wire money out of the account as he was working for the Philippine government. And they could have had several $billion, but because of a loyalist in the Philippines, a Marcos loyalist, it never came through. So in March of 1986, Corazon Aquino canceled the National Assembly Congress in the Philippines and signed a bill giving her absolute power until a Philippine government or a new constitution could be ratified. And a lot of people were very worried that since Marcos was a dictator, that she would become a dictator also. And she said it would only take 60 days and she would have a commission to create a new constitution for the Philippines. And it would then be voted on by the people of the Philippines. And this actually came as a challenge to the legislature of the Philippines because the legislature actually declared Marcos president for life. And it was a lot of those members in the Philippine Congress legislature were Marcos loyalists. One person was Jovito Solanga, and he was given files by the State Department in the United States, which they believe Marcos had amassed a massive fortune. So he had documents from the United States that was deposited into Swiss bank accounts and a list of more than 50 U.S. companies believed to do business in the Philippines that may have been given bribes and kickbacks to Marcos during his reign and power. One company was Westinghouse, which they believe had paid millions of dollars to Marcos, to Herminio Decini Jr., in order to win a contract for the Bataan nuclear power plant. Several documents listed real estate holdings by Marcos' family around the U.S. and the world, and they were not in Marcos' name, none of them. He never put anything in his name. He had a silent partner, and everything was put in the silent partner's name. So the House Subcommittee on Asian and Pacific Affairs began to investigate these documents, and most of the holdings were held by corporations instead of individuals located in Curacao, Panama, Hong Kong, which all were in control by friends of the Marcoses. So many of these individuals, when they were confronted by the United States government, said they did not buy the properties for the Marcos family. So the United States began a major investigation to show that none of the $400 million plus per year in aid to the Philippines, this would be military aid, was embezzled by Ferdinand Marcos. And they asked for an audit by the Philippine government. And General Ver testified funds were used appropriately. And these documents are part of thousands that were confiscated when the Marcos arrived in Hawaii. So within a month, a group of Filipino private investigators discovered that in Amy's, that being Ferdinand's daughter, her office in Mandaluyong in EDSA, they had a search warrant, and they believed there was gold in there. And so they enlisted several military members to help conduct a search of the premises. They came in at night, they scaled the fence, and so within a few hours of signing, 4 cars drove up to their office around midnight, and they climbed over the fence and to this fury. The investigation crew were allowed in the premises while the guards stood outside watching, and to find out there was no people going to come and attack them. Well, inside they found cardboard boxes and filing cabinets full of folders and papers. And these papers revealed names of offshore companies and overseas investment firms that were contracted through the Marcoses and cronies to help them launder money. These documents proved to be an invaluable asset to the U.S. government and the Philippine company to prove the staggering amount of money that Marcos stole from the country. So Corazon Aquino was now the president of the Philippines, and she had a major, major task in front of her. The nations for years were plagued by corruption, greed, subversion. So her first act as president was to fire all government officials, provincial mayors, governors, senators, and especially those who were loyal to Marcos, and replace them by people that she knew would be loyal to her. So within 2 months of Marcos's departure, a KLM cargo airway bill was discovered from 1983, was given to the PCGG to investigate, and it discovered between 27 to 30 shipments of gold between 1981 to 1985 had been made by the Marcos family administration to ensure liquidity to meet its foreign payments. So they were selling gold in order to pay the national debt. So that was all they could discover at this point in time. So the total amount of money raised in the sales could not be established, so they didn't know how much was actually sold and how much was made. And the central bank could not give the details of the sales amount. So it was not on paper. So they had 30 shipments that were going out. They know it was sold, but they don't know how much they made and where the money went to. So within a month, an Australian metal broker reported to PCGG that Andrew Tan, remember him, Andrew Tan, offered to sell him 2,000 tons of gold in 1985. He was told it was part of a World War II loot that was stolen by the Japanese because of this. The two discussed the sale. In June of 86, the U.S. judge ordered all the assets, that was $1 billion worth of gold, something like $400 million worth of Imelda's jewelry, to be released to the Marcos family. However, the lawyers for the U.S. government appealed that judgment so that the assets wouldn't be returned to them. And actually, the lawyer was Rudy Giuliani, and he filed charges against the Marcos family for RICO. And the family was followed by several lawsuits filed in the Philippine and the U.S. governments. A lot of the lawsuits in the United States was actually the Philippine government was not very happy with. So after this happened, General Ver, worried he was going to go to jail and losing all his ill-gotten wealth, decided that he was going to get a fake passport and leave the United States. And because of that, Marcos found out about it and started mocking him and told him, just go anywhere you want because nobody wants you. And Ver quickly discovered this was true, and all the people that he took advantage of years ago now took advantage of him, and his power and his wealth was now gone. So during the interviews with lawyers regards to several lawsuits, Marcos admitted to using 4 government agencies while in office to suppress people who were in opposition of him. And they were exiled outside the Philippines, and other individuals were in other countries. The United States government did an investigation. They discovered that out of 400 pages, documents from the U.S. agencies confirmed the agencies were the NISA, the ISAFP, the NBI, and the United States CIA, FBI. The CIA and FBI knew about this, but they allowed it to continue because Marcos was so friendly to the United States. And General Ver, to conduct such activities, gave him all full support and cooperation, so he did whatever. The Philippine government was closing the noose on. They were actually finding out everything about Marcos and his money. However, discovered there was not a total freeze on his assets. They thought all bank accounts were frozen. And they discovered that P.A. Vine, who managed Marcos's 2 trust accounts in Standard Chartered Hong Kong Trustee Limited, received instruction from Marcos to send his lawyer $708,000 to his lawyers in Washington, D.C. So later on that month, the NBI informant reported he saw 75 kilo bars in a Quezon City. And this location he identified was Jonathan Dela Cruz, an aide of Bongbong Marcos. And at that time, it would have been about $70 million. And I believe the goal was written about in LA Times on March 16th. I think that was 86 maybe. So the LA Times actually reported that there was gold found in an office. And they don't know if the gold was actually taken by the police or not, because there was no written down, and the police were still corrupt at that time. And so the police officers at the time actually probably could have took the gold and kept it. Back then, the police wore brown police uniforms. And after Marcos left, the police had such a bad stain on their names that they changed their color to blue. So in 1965, now we'll go back to 1965 here, Marcos' tax return reported that his net worth was only $7,000. Okay, so when he became president, and 18 years later, he was worth more than $10 billion, and he only made $5,000 a year as president of the Philippines. So all I'm saying is, I really wish I had his, personal investment broker, 5,000, make it 10 billion. I wish I could find somebody that could do that for me. All right, so next time we'll be talking more about the Philippine government looking for gold.